Hey watch friends, today we're going to check out the latest offering from the US-based microbrand DeMarco. This is their upcoming Ironside 200. This one's going to be launching on Kickstarter in late April or early May of 2026. The exact date hasn't been finalized yet as of time of recording, but of course I have a link down the video description if you care to check that out. I do want to note before we dive into this, we're looking at an early production sample today. So this really isn't going to be a review so much as it is a conceptual overview, because there's going to be a lot of updates on the production version that we're going to talk about, but what's not going to change is the basic wear characteristics, so we'll explore that. As we dive into this, we'll first knock out the basic specs, we'll get a better feel for this particular one, but more importantly, what it's going to look like on the final version, and I'll pop up a render of that as well, and really just get a flavor and sense as to what you can expect. First, for the specs, measured from roughly the 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock position, the case is coming in at 39.3 millimeters. The bezel is for all intents and purposes actually flush, coming in at 38.9 millimeters. However, some of that's going to be variants of measured 3 to 9 versus 2 to 8. As far as the lugs, you're looking at a strap change friendly 20 millimeters. The lug to lugs reasonably compact 46 millimeters. The total thickness is coming in at 12 millimeters. However, do note that is inclusive of this double dome sapphire crystal. So that definitely adds to the overall thickness. I think the actual wear characteristic of this is very thin, and we'll explore that as we go further. This is going to be beating away with a Miyota 9015. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it already, but that's going to be an automatic movement. It has hacking, hand winding, around a 42-hour power reserve, higher beat at 28,800 beats per hour, and just all around excellent movement. Great choice in my opinion. Water resistance, with this being a dive style watch, as I'm sure you'd expect, has decent water resistance, looking at 200 meters or 20 atmospheres. And then on this factory included bracelet, sized to my 6.5 inch wrist, you're looking at 138.3 grams. So really actually not too bad at all there. It's relatively lightweight, but still has a solid and rugged feel for it. It does also come with a strap option that we'll check out here as we go through as well. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and first check out the colors. This is going to be available in 4 different options. There, of course, is the green that we're looking at here today. There's additionally a red version, a dark blue version that almost looks black in some of the pictures, but it actually is a deep royal blue color. And then there's also a very attractive mint green coloration as well. What you're going to notice is one of the signature characteristics of this is going to be the wave kind of pattern in there. And this with the Ironside namesakes actually named after a famous Boston ship, which they're based out of Massachusetts. So with that, they leaned into kind of that wave, which also gives kind of like a braided knot effect for that dial texturing. Really nice light play that you get as we see throughout the footage here and moving that around. Really do like that. It is definitely on the busy side, but I do think it's attractive and going to be appealing to a lot of people. At the 12 o'clock as well as the 6 o'clock position, you're going to see that this does have what looks like printing with the DeMarco logo and name, as well as the name for the model. However, that actually does have some depth to it, so I do believe that that's applied, but in a printing style. So that's actually a pretty cool effect there. On the production version, they are intending to lose the crosshairs. So that vertical that you see from 12 to 6 and 3 to 9, that will be removed just to go for a cleaner overall aesthetic, especially with that dial texture for it. Another area that they're definitely going to clean up is the chaptering. As you can see, this one currently has very bold, wide hashes out at the chapter ring. What they're going to do is they're actually going to thin that out, and they're going to tuck them back behind the indexes. I personally think that's a great move and was definitely one of the feedback pieces that I had for them. It's really going to add a little bit of breathing room. It will add actually some legibility, including especially at the 55 to 5 minute, where you only have the 3 hashes in there. That'll allow them to have the 4 hashes. And I just think overall visually, having that true chaptering effect is going to be better suited. At the 3 o'clock position, you can see that this does incorporate a date window. On the production version, they're actually going to add framing to that. And most importantly for me, they're going to add a color match date wheel. So I definitely think that that's welcome. Again, those are some of my early feedback pieces for this as well. So I'm glad to see that they are listening to that feedback. And do drop a comment. Let me know what you would like to see happen, because they are still refining some of the details here as they approach the launch and getting to the production ready version. So shifting over and staying on that theme, looking at the hardware, the handset on this is actually going to be completely changed for your hour and minute hand. With this, I really do think it's a little bit too dainty for it, and I'm not crazy about the shape. However, they're really changing that up. You're going to be looking at a Dauphine type handset for your hour and minute hand. Specifically though, you're going to be looking at a more bold Dauphine for your minute hand, and then for your hour hand, you're looking at kind of like a modified Dauphine Arrow incorporation for that. So it has an arrow tip, but more of a Dauphine style base. So as you'd expect with Dauphine, that is going to have the faceting as well. The second hand is going to be, I believe, staying the same for that. So that's going to be a color accent depending on which version you're looking at. Here we're looking at a gold coloration, which is very subtle and easy to pick up as just being reflection. However, that is actually the color of the hand. What you're looking at for styling, as you can see, it's very light in terms of counterbalance, so it is what I would call tip heavy for it, which isn't a bad thing. It's just an interesting look and touch for that. They do have a trapezoid out there to function as kind of the lollipop for the tip, but overall it's just a pretty simplistic and in this case polished, as I said, gold accent for the second hand. Shifting over to the hardware in this, I don't believe other than orientation is going to be changing up. They're looking at, or you're looking at rather, a pip, a triangle pip style at the 12 o'clock position, and then at the 6 as well as your 9, you have trapezoids, so that kind of ties into that effect, gives it almost like a flattened out tooth look for it, which I think ties in with the kind of cardinal axes there. At the 6 o'clock position, you do just have a small little square there because of the date window, and then in between that, you're going to have your rectangles for it. So I think it's a pretty decent looking overall as far as for the application of the markers and the overall finishing for that. Really didn't think that needed a whole lot of change there. As far as the loom, this has, as you'd expect with being a dive style watch, a pretty generous application of BGW9 loom applied throughout. I've actually found in terms of overall performance, I think as it is, it's pretty well suited to it. There's, I would like to see on the Dauphine handset, I'm hoping that they'll keep a good surface area for that so that will continue to perform well. But as it is, this definitely gives good hope for what that performance is going to be like. So I think it's going to live up to expectations. Not the most impressive that I've seen out there, but I think overall it is plenty acceptable for this style of watch. Shifting over to the bezel, with being a dive style offering, you're looking at, as you'd probably expect, a 120 click unidirectional bezel. The actual bezel, this is going to be another area where it changes. Right now, this is polished and it is relatively flush. As I'm sure you can guess, it's hard to grip a hold of. So with that, they're actually going to make some adjustments to it. Specifically, they're intending to move over to brushing, but we'll come back to that as far as the action. As you move up towards the top, you can see that this has kind of like a scallop or a chamfer cut for the overall aesthetic there. I think it's a nice visual look. Doesn't add a lot in terms of traction, as I just talked about there. However, I think visually it looks pretty nice. This features a polished bezel insert, specifically a polished ceramic bezel insert, so you have nice scratch resistance there. Very welcome in my book. Another area they're going to change is the numeral layout is going to be completely changed around. So you're going to be looking at your 15-minute hashes and then your 20, 30, 40, and 50 for your numerals, as opposed to the prototype or the production sample that we're looking at here today, or I guess actually more accurately prototype that we're looking at here today. So they will be cleaning that overall layout up as well. As far as the action, let's go ahead and take a listen to this. I will say I have to kind of cheat and push onto this because it is a little hard to grip onto, but let's listen. As you can hear, pretty nice tactile click for it. I really don't have much to complain about with the bezel action, other than the fact that the bezel itself is hard to grip a hold of. Almost impossible to grip this way, so you have to kind of push down in. And as a result, with doing that, and no real back play or anything for it, everything's well centered on this version. So really nothing to complain about there as far as the action. But as you see me wiping away here, with having to cheat this, and especially with having a polished bezel insert, you're going to get smudges all over the bezel itself, the insert, the polish insert, as well as, of course, the crystal. So I'm not crazy about having to do that cheater, but again, we'll come back to that. I do have a suggestion beyond just the textural change that they can make that will hopefully help to clean that up. As far as the case itself, much like we just saw on the bezel, you're going to be looking at a lot of polishing here. So as it is right now, you're looking at a 316L stainless steel. That's going to be for the full watch, but you're looking at full polishing for this side. It's going to be a slab type construction. As you can see, it is relatively flat for that as far as the actual side of it. As far as the profile, it does have a gentle, so you have a subtle downturn to it. I actually have found that the case back is not too bad here, and it nests pretty well on the wrist. So that part I don't think is actually bad that they did a subtle. Sometimes with slabs they're a little bit teeter-totter effect like some others that we've seen. However, this one actually isn't too bad there, so I think that's done pretty well. As far as the top, you can see that this does incorporate a chamfer, easy to miss there because there is so much polishing for it, but that cuts into the lugs, and I think from the overall lug profile, you can see definitely a bit on the chunky side, which I think is fitting for a dive style watch, and then with that polished chamfer, that gives a nice little touch there. You do have a curvature in between, so for your fitted end link there, and then over on the 3 o'clock side, you can see it does have integrated crown guards, which that just kind of swoops up from there. As far as the crown itself, as I'm sure you'd expect with being a dive style watch, this is a screw-in construction. It's measured in at 6.7 millimeters for it, so I think that's well sized, both visually as well as actually gripping hold of. The texture on this is a wide coin edge for it, and that does have nice bite to it as well. And then additionally, you can see they did more of like a brush for the texture on that, or the finishing on that. So I think all of that plays together nicely. But then on the exterior, they did polishing as well as an etching with their logo. So I think overall the crown's done pretty well. Nothing really that I think needs to be changed around there. As far as shifting over to the case back itself, again, I'm sure you'd expect for being a dive style watch, is a screw-in construction. It does feature circular brushing, moving all the way around or going all the way around, which I think that's well incorporated there. It does feature an exhibition window. That's something that I personally think that they could go either way on. It would be fine if they lost it, for the simple fact that this has a relatively basic movement. So this is going to be your Miyota 9 series, and it doesn't have any real decorations. Even the rotor itself, they have their logo added, but otherwise it looks pretty well bone stock for it. So I don't mind that they have the exhibition window, but if they could thin this down further, that would be welcome for me, and I think they'd be better off to go with a solid case back, but otherwise, no real complaints there. Shifting over to the bracelet. The bracelet on this, as we already saw, it is going to be fitted. It does actually have a female end link, so nice drop for that. This is going to be a 5-link or Jubilee type for the overall aesthetic for that. And as is common with Jubilee type bracelets, you're looking at brushing on the outer links as well as polishing on the inner links. Again, just like with Beads of Rice bracelets, because of this styling for it, you're going to look at great articulation. So it has great drape across the wrist, as well as when you move around, it has good side-to-side action as well. It's really nothing to complain about there in terms of the overall comfort. It does feature quick release spring bars on the back, so that's welcome, especially with the 20 millimeter lugs. You can change that around easily, so no real problems there. And then this is retained with screws. So if you don't already have one, I'll have a link down in the video description for a quality screwdriver, as well as a walkthrough as to how to change that around, but that'll make it nice and easy for you. As far as the clasp itself, the clasp you're going to see on the front or in the main surface is going to be fully brushed with their logo. Then on the sides, you're looking at, you guessed it, more polishing for this. It does have a double pusher. You open that up, you have a milled bridge, and then most importantly, you do have toeless micro. This is similar to styles that we've seen before. This is just a basic where you pull that lever, it slides out there, and then it does ratchet in. So you can close that up without any issues while on wrist. So that's definitely very welcome there. You don't have to push the button for that. And then here's what that looks like on the exterior as far as the actual link integration. So that's always welcome in my book. Shifting over to the strap that this comes with, you're looking at, I believe this is an FKM rubber. If not, it feels and appears similar to an FKM, but this is a rubber strap. You're looking at a basic slab kind of construction, but it does have that ridge in the middle, and I'm sure you've seen others like this as well. That carries over to the keepers, so it integrates nicely there. This does have a customized buckle. It's a relatively standard, just customized with their logo, but I think it's a nice style buckle, and we've seen this on some other chunkier rubber straps, so I think that's pretty well done there. That is going to be a little more of a deft hand in that they have mostly brushing and then just an accent of polish, which I think is welcome. And then it does feature quick release spring bars on the back as well. All right, so with all of that out of the way, you should hopefully have a much better feel for this specific watch, not just for what it is right now, but what they're looking to make it into. As I said, definitely do drop a comment. Let me know what you think. What would you like to see changed up? But before we wrap things up, let's go ahead and bring in some comps. First, this is their first DeMarco watch. This is their chronograph, which is named chronograph here. Gives you an idea as far as the overall aesthetic. You can see that's kind of like the similar for the scallop cutting on that, but a different execution for the bezel, of course. And then here it is next to a Revolot Hex Mariner. This is a 39mm watch. And the reason why I want to show this is both of these are actually 39s, but this looks huge comparatively. As you can see with the chunky bezel here and just the overall layout for this, I think it has a lot more presence than people are probably going to expect for this because it has so much dial real estate and otherwise. And then here it is, again, just to give you an idea of sizing. This is next to a fairly expansive, this is a Dorenzo, the Eclipse, the DRZ03 for it. And this gives you an idea at 40mm. You can see this one is a relatively expansive because it has a thin bezel and a wide dial here. So it gives you an idea as to how much visually things can change up depending on the execution of the watch. So I think for this, and kind of just transitioning there, for the positives, I think they actually sized this up really well. For me, at least on my 6.5-inch wrist, it has a lot of presence, but I think it's still going to have good presence for larger wristed folks, and I think it could go smaller than my wrist as well. Though I don't think it can go a ton smaller because of available links, at least on the bracelet, so you'd probably have to wear it on a strap there if you go too much smaller than my wrist. I also think the color matching on this green on green version, I was really impressed as to how well they matched the polished bezel insert with the dial color. That's not always easy. A lot of times they do actually have, to my eye, a clash to them. Here I think it actually works well, and it gives that kind of Rolex Hulk vibe for it with the green on green. So I think that's nicely done. The texture I think is a lot of fun. I think that's going to be polarizing for it because it is so busy for the dial texture, but I think it's a nice and unique look for that. Definitely sets it apart. Obviously, we've seen a lot of the stamped or milled guilloche kind of dials out there, but this one I think is cool as far as its execution. And then for sizing, this is actually pretty thin. I know the 12mm doesn't sound super thin, but it wears thinner, I think, than that says. The case back here, you can see it's a little bit thick, but it actually nests into the wrist, which means that all you're really left with is this fairly narrow side profile. And then you've got kind of a scoop up for the bezel insert and then the double dome. So nice seamless integration for that. So I think in that regard, it actually wears thinner than you're going to expect. So I think that's well done. And these are things that are going to carry over to the production version. But what about some critiques? Beyond, obviously, the items that I've already mentioned, that they're going to be updating the chapter ring, the updates to the date, all of that kind of stuff, I really wanted to highlight some things that they haven't yet at least said that they're going to address. So with the bezel, I mentioned they're going to change over to brushing. I would like to see them actually kick that out to where you have this sit a little bit proud. I think visually, that's going to give a little more of a presence to it, but most importantly, I think that's going to give some overhang that you can actually grip a hold of it and take advantage of that brushed texture that they're going to add to the side. The clasp itself, like so many other areas, as well as the case, I would have liked to have seen them lose some of that side polish is just a fingerprint magnet. As you can see, I'm intentionally not wiping it, so you can see what that's going to do to you on wrist there. I think they should go brushing on the side and just keep the polished accent for the chamfers, and the same thing's going to be true with the case. For me, this is a little bit too much polish for my liking, and most importantly, as you're playing around with this, while it does definitely give that dress diver look, I think that it could accomplish the same thing while keeping horizontal front to rear brushing on the side, and you're going to have less fingerprints that are going to show. This is very much a fingerprint magnet with all the polishing that it has, and it's not really suited to my personal style preference. I would like to see a little more brushing, tone some of that down, especially with this Jubilee of having all the polishing there. And then pricing, I will say, the MSRP on this is all they have announced at this point. You're looking at $549 for MSRP. They will be launching it a fair amount cheaper, and I think that's a good thing. The reason why I'm bringing this up in critique, I do think at $550, this is very competitive territory. I think in that regard, it would be very aggressively priced for the market because there's a lot of other options out there and some really, really good ones. So I'm hoping that they do a fairly solid discount when they launch this for it. I'd like to see it more in like 400-ish territory at launch, but we'll see where they come out for pricing for that. And then finally, with that rubber strap, I would like to see them do a curve for this to where it's actually fitted so you don't have that gap on the bracelet. I think especially at the price point they're asking for MSRP, even though it comes with rubber strap and it doesn't have to, I think that's going to absolutely enhance this visually and otherwise for it. So I definitely think that would be a welcome change. So with that hopefully gives you a good idea as to kind of what to expect as to if this is one that you're interested in or not. Like I said, let me know what you think. What else haven't I mentioned that you would like to see them change or consider for changing? Do you just not like the style at all? Or do you already think that it's done in final form and you're kind of sold on the updates as have been seen here? Overall, I think this has solid potential, and I personally think that they're moving in the right direction, and I'm glad to see they've been listening to feedback. So there you have it. I hope this has been helpful. Thanks for watching.